Good evening. My name is Karma Amos, and I am privileged to serve as the minister of this congregation and to welcome you into this space tonight. Whether you are here in the room with us or joining us online, it is in the sanctuary of our interconnected hearts that we gather to honor the lives lost to gun violence and to share strength and encouragement with one another as we move forward in relentless hope that there can be a better way. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we often begin our services by lighting a chalice, which is the symbol of our UU faith. And we light the chalice to shine a light on our deepest values and our highest aspirations. The flame beckons us further along the journey to our own hopes and encourages us, in as much as we're able, to become the answer to our own prayers. Tonight, may the light of this chalice give light and warmth to our community in our grief, in our outrage, in our despair, as well as in our hopefulness and our commitment to love. May this flame keep us company in this time that we share as a silent witness to the possibilities of love and peace and harmony, and a world in which every person has a chance to thrive.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lynn Ellis. I am a member of this church and a board member of Maine Gun Safety Coalition. I have helped organize an event for many years, remembering lives lost to gun violence. Tonight is the 10th anniversary of the tragedy in Newtown at Sandy Hook Elementary School, where 20 children and 6 educators were killed. Many of us thought this unimaginable shooting was an isolated event and most likely would never happen again. Then on May 24th of this year, it did. 19 4th and 5th graders were killed at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Gun violence has become the leading cause of death in American children. We follow the direction of the Newtown Action Alliance that was founded by Newtown residents in response to that tragic day as an all-volunteer grassroots organization working tirelessly to transform tragedy into meaningful action to end gun violence. They have organized an annual event each year in Washington, D.C. We also follow the guidance of the Unitarian Universalist Association, Affirming Commitment to Gun Violence Prevention of 2014, which includes in that resolution that we work for gun safety, background checks, and a ban on assault weapons, and that we reach out to partner with interfaith groups and community advocates. Gun deaths have surpassed 45,000, and hundreds of thousands of Americans have been injured in this last 10 years. Tonight, we welcome all of you, courageous survivors of gun violence, dedicated state elected officials, gun violence prevention advocacy groups, veterans, who are all working together to end this crisis of gun violence in our nation. We know this is a public health emergency, taking approximately 100 lives daily, whether in a school shooting, a grocery store, a movie theater, on the streets of major cities, domestic violence, homicides, and veteran suicides. We are saddened by our ever-widening circle of those impacted by gun violence. Let us take our anguish, our fear, and instead of letting it paralyze us, let it mobilize us to take action in every way that we can. The faces you saw on the video as you entered the sanctuary represent only a fraction of lives lost over the past several decades. We know that gun violence affects people regardless of age, income, location, religion, and race. We honor them in remembrance and by taking action to prevent future tragedies. Our program this evening is presented with two areas of focus: remembrance and honoring through action. We will honor all victims and survivors of gun violence, shine a light on the epidemic of devastating gun violence in our nation, and call for common sense measures to address this crisis. Our shared covenant is love. May it guide each of us in our search for, I couldn't find the words, in our search for what? An end? Enough? Thoughts and prayers? All the things we keep putting out there in our search, where our precious children will find a future. May it bind our broken hearts and light the way for a better day, a better way. Love changes hearts. People change policy and make laws. May we find a path forward to change the things we cannot accept, should not accept. We must prevail. Our children are depending on us. I want to take this time to introduce Judy Richardson, who will come and speak with us. Judy is a behavioral health professional and co-founder of Remembering Darien, and she'll tell you all about Darien.
Thank you. Here we are on the 10-year anniversary. We call it a tragiversary. It's really not an anniversary, which gives different meaning to the term. When we started working with Sandy Hook in Newtown Alliance, there was only one video. Now there's three, right? 3 of the people in it. But I'm here to remind Mainers that gun violence happens here in Maine. This is our reality. I speak here today because our daughter Darien was taken violently way too soon. Darien's life cut short and her voice forever silenced. But not really, because I'm still here, and I'll be speaking for her. I will always be her voice. We want this to not happen to anyone else. So many families are torn apart by gun violence, including suicide, domestic violence, and are often forgotten. So we continue to call attention to the impact on gun violence in all of our communities. Darien was beautiful, inside and out. She had a bright, infectious smile that drew people to her. Darien had a vibrant zest for life and was always loving, kind, and helpful. Her life was marked by compassion and generosity. She spent a greater part of her college years right here in Brunswick. She was a 2006 graduate of Bowdoin College. She valued education and worked very hard. Darien sought out and found only the good in everyone she met. She was a social butterfly who loved music and loved to dance. Darien left the world and those she encountered better in her wake. Darien also had her entire life ahead of her and so much more to contribute. On January 8, 2010, armed intruders burst into her bedroom and opened fire. One of the bullets struck her left hand, destroying her thumb. As she attempted to roll off her bed, another bullet struck her right leg by her knee, and that bullet traveled all the way up to her hip where it was lodged, and it was going to be remaining. Her world was violently turned upside down in an instant. She endured great physical and emotional pain, working hard to recover, spending 3 days in ICU, 18 days in critical care, and many more surgeries to come. Tragically, it's still hard. Tragically, on February 28, 2010, she died due to delayed complications from the gunshot wounds. Her life cut short at 25. Darien's death devastated our family. To compound this tragedy, Darian's homicide was never solved. This is due in part to a dangerous loophole in the law in both Maine and at the federal level. Those who purchase a firearm at a gun show or through a private sale do not need to pass a background check. Darian was murdered with a .45 semi-automatic caliber handgun. The gun was later recovered at the scene of another murder in Portland on February 10th, 2010. Police recovered the bullet from Darian's hip after her death, and ballistics confirmed that it came from that gun. The gun was traced to another Maine resident who bought the gun through retail and actually had a background check. But he sold it very quickly after that, and he doesn't remember where, when. He didn't know the people, he didn't ask any questions, and he kept no records. All completely legal. The law required no background check, no name for the buyer, no paperwork, because it's a private sale. Exchange of cash for a gun. There are millions of people who are legally prohibited from owning a gun. But unless they buy a gun from a licensed dealer, there's no way to prevent them from completing the sale and no way to find them if they later commit a crime with that gun. I don't know if the person that killed our daughter would have passed a background check, but I know he never had to. 5,037 days have gone by since our daughter's death, and not a day goes by that we don't feel her absence in the world and the empty space where she should be. The heartbreak continues because as time passes, we still grieve her. She misses out on everything that people should be experiencing with their families. Our other daughter was married, she wasn't there. Last week, Wayne and I traveled to DC to attend the 10th annual vigil. We also attended a Center for American Progress Gun Violence Prevention Summit, where we were sat on the panel with parents from Uvalde. 6 months after their children have been murdered, they're on a panel fighting, trying to get people to listen. It's horrible. There's 150 families were there last week. And I have to tell you, we should not be the ones fighting. It shouldn't be us. It should be all of us. But we're here, and we fight. So we need to protect our children. We do it from everything else. We protect them from injuries, illnesses, tobacco, drownings, bikes, drugs, strangers, but we do nothing to protect them against gun violence. I urge you to get involved, call your representatives, tell everyone they need to act, get your friends involved. This place should be filled, right? We don't want sympathy, we don't want your thoughts and prayers. We want empathy and action. I want your anger, I want your outrage. I want you to go home and look at your loved ones, your children, your siblings, your grandchildren. Imagine your life without them. And then I want you to promise you'll do everything in your power to prevent this from happening. Because if you don't, if you keep doing nothing in your power, you'll eventually get the same call that we did from the hospital, or you'll get a knock on the door from the police, which we also did. That your person wasn't safe in classroom, that your person wasn't safe in church, that your person wasn't safe at the grocery store, at the mall, at their workplace. Your whole life will shatter in an instant, and you will spend the rest of your life putting your pieces back together. Our hope is that we recognize the issue of gun violence for the public health epidemic that it is, and that we move forward to implement better laws regarding guns to save lives and prevent injury. It's too late for us, but it's not too late to prevent more injuries, tragedies. Life matters more than politics.
So I'd like to invite Sophia Padden to the podium, who is, Sophia is currently a grad student at Muskie Institute. And I'll let you tell her story, but she lived in the town next door to Sandy Hook. Welcome, Sophia.
Good evening. My name is Sophie Patton, and 10 years ago today, I was in high school when the Sandy Hook shooting occurred. However, I wasn't in high school here in Maine. I was in the halls of Wilton High School in Wilton, Connecticut, located 10 minutes away from Sandy Hook Elementary School. Growing up in a town so close to Sandy Hook provided me with a firsthand account of what a community grapples with from the very first moments following the news breaking to the months after. On the morning of December 14th, 2012, I was a freshman in high school. Class had just been released, and me and my fellow classmates were swarming the halls, chatting amongst ourselves as we normally did. However, unlike most days, when every social circle would be talking about something different, this time there was only one big topic on everyone's mind. Did you hear about what's happening in Newtown? Despite my high school administration's best efforts to turn off Wi-Fi to prevent the news from spreading and people panicking, we all had iPhones very capable of giving us live updates. Somehow the hall monitors were able to break up 350 freshmen circling around talking about how the FBI was now in Newtown and corral us into classrooms for the next period. However, what became very apparent as updates kept unfolding is, number one, this is really bad, and number two, where are all the teachers going? Roughly 75% of the teachers who worked at Wilton High School lived in Newtown or towns further out due to the living costs of Wilton. This is a fact that historically was only obvious on delayed openings when their long commutes proved to be difficult. But on December 14th, 2012, we were all reminded of it when the teachers were visibly distraught and running out of classrooms mid-lesson to pick up their kids back in Newtown. The next weekend, most teachers were out as the Newtown School District had closed its schools until the new year. My science teacher shared his friend lost their daughter, police were at all entry points of my school, and the Wilton Board of Education was discussing installing bulletproof glass at schools. After the holidays, we all came back to high school and life continued. However, on a cold evening in early April, I, along with 20 other girls, were humbly reminded a community just doesn't move on from a tragedy like a school shooting. It was lacrosse season for the Wilton Warriors, and the schedule called for the varsity girls lacrosse team to travel to Newtown High School. Upon preparation for the game, I clearly remember all of us wondering how we should play this game. Do we let them win? Is it insulting if we hand them the win? But we also can't beat them by a lot. I think our coach finally stepped in and said something coachly like, we'll play as we always play, with respect. On the bus ride there, I remember it was unlike any other game. It was not a bus ride filled with music blasting. Rather, it was filled with stillness and an increasing awareness of the town and community we were entering. As we pulled into the high school, 28 little angels lined the entryway, and signs of remembrance were at every turn. At one point during our warm-up, I remember us being informed their coach had lost their daughter to the shooting. After the game and during the handshakes, each Newtown player handed me and my teammates a little clay heart with a note tied to it with a ribbon reading, "In memory of those lost on 12/14/12. No act of kindness is too little. No act of kindness goes unnoticed." And on the other side read Newtown High School Girls Lacrosse. Pay it forward. I was given this heart more than 10 years ago, and every day since I have known exactly where to find it. It has been exactly where I placed it 10 years ago, my lacrosse bag that was with me on the day of the game. Heeding the words of Newtown's girls varsity lacrosse team, I ask you all to always remember the lives lost and to act with kindness, because no act of kindness is too little, no act of kindness goes unnoticed. Thank you.
Would you join me in this responsive reading? And we invite everyone to join in remembering and praying for the shooting victims, their families, and friends. At the rising of the sun and at its going down, we remember them. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year And when it ends, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joy we crave to share, we remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them. When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
So, at the time of the tragedy in Newtown, a musical group by the name of the Alternate Roots wrote a song that you're going to hear shortly in honor of one of the children, and it has a really special meaning with regard to this anniversary. So we're very fortunate to have Lynn Deeves and Leah Boyd to sing it for us.
To be humble, to be kind. It is the giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend. To give in such a way that has no end. We are love, we are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. To be bold, to be brave. It's in the thinking that the heart can still be saved. And the darkness can come quick. The danger's in the anger and the hanging on to it. We are love, we are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. Tell me what it is that you see. A world that's full of endless possibility. Heroes don't look like they used to. They look like you do. We are love, we are day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other and nothing more. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. We are how we treat each other.
You always wonder what's going to happen when you find yourself about to cry. This is my time. I want to introduce the next speaker, who is Doug Rawlings, who is going to speak to us about veterans. I'm not one much for statistics, but this paper, which is a recent document that talks about the number of deaths in Maine, 132 suicides, of which we know many are veterans, 19 homicides and unintentional 3 deaths. So 154 deaths by gun violence in Maine in 2020. It's hard. It's really hard. Doug is a friend, someone I admire, and I welcome him to the podium now.
Thanks, Lynn. It's an honor to be here. Brief history. In 1985, 5 of us here in the state of Maine created this group called Veterans for Peace. And we created it with the notion of abolishing war and doing it nonviolently. Since then, we have 130 chapters around the United States, 6 international chapters, NGO status at the United Nations. We've been invited to a number of countries to oversee elections and whatnot. Our national office is now in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'd like to, this evening, read a statement that was written by Veterans for Peace National Office on March 21st, 2018. I'll take some excerpts from it. End the gun violence at home and abroad. As veterans who have been traumatized by the violence of war, we are shocked and saddened by the recent mass murder of 17 high school students in Parkland, Florida. Typically, these killings have been perpetrated by troubled young men using military-style assault weapons which are bought and sold in stores across the nation to anyone 18 or over. We applaud the students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and other students around the country who have decided to directly challenge the corrupted politicians and the NRA's lobby for violent death and profits. Veterans for Peace will have a contingent on the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. on March 24th, including several members of our National Board of Directors. Veterans for Peace is also concerned about the culture of violence and hypermasculinity that has been cultivated in the United States. While extreme violence is most visible in video games and movies, it has become the normal part of all aspects of our culture. Young men are taught that to be a man, they must be prepared to be violent. We must start talking about and working on ways to dismantle notions of patriarchy that tell men domination and violence are the only way. Many military veterans see gun violence as a reflection of our culture, which teaches that force or the threat of using force is the most effective and honored way to address conflict resolution. This reflection of gun violence is most starkly seen in the permanent wars that the United States is carrying out in multiple countries. Here at home, deaths of students and others killed in mass shootings and gun violence, including suicide gun deaths, are said to be the price of freedom to bear arms. Civilian casualties in war are written off as collateral damage, the price of freedom and U.S. security. But the truth is, at home or abroad, violence begets violence. These U.S. wars have only served to create more violence, and despite more and more gun access and the spread of open carry and other gun-friendly laws, we see more and more mass shootings and gun violence here at home. We must also oppose the militarization of the police, who are being armed with weapons of war and trained to treat communities of color as occupied enemy territory. To fully address gun violence, we must also talk about domestic violence, violent crime, and gun deaths by suicide. Unfettered gun rights advocates claim that more guns will make us safe. While it's true that legal gun owners commit a small fraction of gun violence offenses, there's a growing body of research that shows the presence of a gun in a home increases the likelihood of someone in that home being killed by a gun. For example, of the 93 people who die from gun violence in the United States every day, 58 of those deaths, or nearly 2/3, are suicides with guns. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention data show suicide with a gun is the most common and by far the most deadly suicide method. This is close to home for us veterans, because 20 to 22 of us die every day by suicide. If we couple these suicide statistics with the above domestic violence numbers, it's easy to see that violent crime, like mass shootings and street violence, are only part of our nation's gun death epidemic. This is the holistic view of gun violence that Veterans for Peace wants to share with all those who share a sense of urgency that something must be done. Yes, military assault weapons should be banned. Yes, high-capacity ammo magazines too. Thorough background checks should be required of all those wishing to purchase firearms, without exceptions. We must also take steps to rein in racist police killings and to change the violent, hyper-masculine culture in this country. We must demilitarize United States society and reverse the violent United States foreign policy, which is causing death and destruction in too many countries. We must address domestic violence and suicide. We must ask who is benefiting from flooding United States urban and rural communities with guns. Are they the same manufacturers and investors that gain from global arms sales that ensure gun violence around the world? The toll of this violence on our society, on the working class men and women who are pressed into fighting the nation's wars, as well as the violence the United States government export while killing innocent people around the world, is tragic and intolerable. It must end.
So as we've heard, what are we going to do? I am just so honored to see each and every one of you here tonight. Many of you who I know are working tirelessly, as I am, to end this epidemic. As I said earlier, and as I see among you, elected officials who are committed and dedicated to passing common sense gun laws in Maine. And so that's where we're going to start in our advocacy section of this program, is moving forward. And so I'm really happy to introduce Senator Ann Carney, who is the co-chair of the Legislative Caucus, the Gun Safety Caucus, and she'll speak to you about the work that they're doing in the legislature. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I'm really honored to be here with you this evening for this remembrance event, and especially honored to be with you in this beautiful, sacred space. Some of you may know that I was a religion major in college, and I have a master in theological studies. My studies and my interest in theology actually really focused on the power of religion to initiate and create social and political change. And so I studied things like Latin American liberation theology, feminist theology, and African American liberation theology. And so it seems especially fitting to me that we're here meeting in a church to remember the lives lost to gun violence, and also to talk about how we can change social norms and laws related to gun violence. My colleague, Representative Vicky Dudera, and I chair the Gun Safety Caucus. One of my other colleagues, Representative Margaret Craven, is also here today. It's a bipartisan group of legislators that work to address the effects of firearms on public health and safety in Maine. We'll begin our work in January with a series of informational meetings to help legislators understand the many issues related to gun violence, and then also to look at legislative approaches to reducing the risk of harm by firearms that Mainers face. In the days following the Uvalde Elementary School massacre, motivated by the anger and grief we all felt about that massacre, and also by our constituents' demands that we engage in action, a group of legislators informally, calling ourselves the working group, and Representative Craven is also a member of the working group, we started meeting to do a deeper dive into gun safety legislation. We worked together to evaluate and help each other draft legislation for this upcoming session. Legislators are now in the process of putting in bill requests for the upcoming legislature. I'm confident that we'll see many legislative proposals that are focused on reducing the risk of harm by firearms in our state. A list of the bills for the upcoming session will be published in mid-January, and at that time we'll have a clear idea of the range of gun safety proposals that'll come to the legislature for consideration. I want to return for a moment to the power of religion to be a force for social and political change. Every bill that is put forward will have a public hearing. The public hearings have a tremendous impact on the path a bill takes both through the legislature and also on its chances of becoming the law. I know several of tonight's speakers have provided powerful testimony in legislative hearings, and I hope that members of this church and the community gathered here together tonight will participate in the legislative process and provide testimony supporting common sense gun safety laws, like things like background checks, magazine capacity limits, anti-swatting legislation, and laws that keep guns out of the hands of felons and other prohibited persons. I feel hopeful that together we can make this political change happen. On behalf of the Gun Safety Caucus, co-chair Representative Dudera, Representative Craven, and all members of the caucus, I want to thank you for your dedication to preventing gun violence and also for your advocacy in this upcoming legislative session. If you'd like more information, you can contact Vicki and I either through Lynn or through our email addresses that are on the legislature's website. And thank you all for listening.
I would be remiss if I didn't also call out my own legislator here in Brunswick, Poppy Arford, who's here with us tonight, who we chat every week about gun safety legislation. And I honor you, Poppy, for all that you do for us in Brunswick. So our next speaker is, in your program, is written as Nicole Palmer. Unfortunately, Nicole couldn't be with us tonight, so we have a substitute to stand in and read her words. But this goes directly to ways that you all can get involved by signing up to be part of the Show Up Network. There is a sign-up sheet in the back on the table if you'd like to join us. When a bill comes up, as Senator Carney expressed, we get together and we figure out ways that we can be involved as the non-legislative advocates. And we testify and we show up in Augusta and try to influence our legislators to vote for that legislation. So I'm happy to say that Hillary Shendy, a member of our board of directors of the Maine Gun Safety Coalition, is going to read Nicole's words.
Hi, as Lynn said, my name's Hillary Shende, and I'm reading this on behalf of Nicole Palmer. The recent swatting incidents in 10 towns across Maine, where people called emergency dispatchers to report violent incidents underway in schools, in what were later proven to be false claims, were an unwelcome reminder that the reality of gun violence is neither far nor impossible here in the state of Maine, despite what we may like to tell ourselves. For me, I was immediately brought back to the day 10 years ago when my aunt texted me to say that my 3 cousins were on lockdown in the Connecticut schools during what would later become known as the Sandy Hook shootings. Fear and dread grabbed my throat, and tears sprang to my eyes, just as they had 10 years ago. And that was before I learned that 3 of the children killed were 1 degree of separation away from me. Before that terrible day, I was one of the millions of Americans who thought that gun violence was something that was awful but unrelated to me, like tsunamis or mudslides. I truly believed that those horrors awaited other people, not me. What I learned during and after Sandy Hook is that gun violence comes for every community, and that no community is safe from it, certainly not the ones where people foolishly tell themselves and anyone who will listen that it won't happen here. I also learned that if I wanted gun violence to end, I had to step up myself to create that reality instead of waiting for others to get it done. The ubiquity of guns in our society, combined with the lack of sensible legislation to address obvious vulnerabilities in our gun-filled society, is a lethal combination. There are reasonable steps that we can and should take, such as background checks for every gun sale without exception, red flag laws that keep guns out of the hands of people in crisis, and magazine capacity restrictions. These steps are obvious and enjoy widely popular support, even in rural, conservative, majority gun-owning Maine towns, because responsible gun owners know that they and their loved ones are safer when everyone is held to the same standards of safe gun ownership. But in order for these ideas to become a reality here in Maine, they need to have more than tacit support from Maine residents. They need every one of us to show up and speak up, literally. This January, a new state legislature will consider and pass new laws, and there is sure to be proposed legislation that would make our state safer from gun violence, as well as proposed legislation that would take us farther away from that goal. In order for any piece of gun safety legislation to have a chance, its proponents must testify in person, write letters to the editor, and reach out to our legislators to advocate for these bills. 2 years ago, the Show Up Network for Gun Safety was a newly formed organization based loosely on the mission of organizing, training, and preparing people to show up in legislative committee hearings to advocate for gun safety. We were successful, beyond even our high expectations, passing 4 pieces of gun safety legislation put forward by the Maine Gun Safety Caucus of the legislature. For reference, 0 pieces of gun safety legislation had been passed in previous decades. But our work is not done, and the challenges this year will be greater, as in-person testifying and lobbying will replace the Zoom testimonies of 2 years ago. If gun violence is something you care about and you want to do something about it, please join us. Sign up at Show Up Network Maine Gun Safety Coalition, which is www.mainegunsafety.org/show-up-network. I'll say that again. www.mainegunsafety.org/show-up-network. to join us and to use your voice in the fight against gun violence. Our state will be safer because of your work to make it so.
So, our next speaker is near and dear to me. Cam Shannon has been the chair of the Maine Gun Safety Coalition since January of 2020 and a member since 2017. I can tell you that she gives her all every day, and I am so honored to be in partnership with her, and I welcome her to the podium.
Thank you, Lynn. Good evening. As Lynn said, my name is Cam Shannon, and like so many who have spoken tonight, I too was personally affected by Sandy Hook. Not because I knew any of the children or teachers who were killed that day, but because at the time, my oldest child was in her second year of preschool and less than a year from starting kindergarten. I felt the terror, agony, and grief of Sandy Hook as a mother who would soon send my child off to school. Now I have 3 children in school, and so the stories and fears and hopes we are all feeling and hearing tonight resonate with me. I share them. Nonetheless, I want to take a moment to say something not about what happened, nor about how we felt at the time, nor about what we fear and hope and feel today. Rather, I want to say a word about what we can do now. I'm here tonight to tell you that we can respond, we are responding, and you can help. I am the chair of the Maine Gun Safety Coalition. MGSC was founded in 2000 with the mission of saving Maine lives from gun violence, and has continued right through Sandy Hook, right up to today, to respond to the kind of gun-drenched madness and danger we are commemorating tonight. We work toward the goal of saving Maine lives in 2 ways. First, we promote gun safety through educational programs, the distribution of free cable locks, and a soon-to-launch Pediatricians Project program, wherein pediatricians will be trained about how to counsel kids' parents about safe gun storage. Pediatricians will also be given free cable locks and materials about safe gun storage to share with the families of their patients. Second, we partner with legislators, members of law enforcement, healthcare providers, parents and grandparents, educators, students, and other citizens interested in supporting common sense gun safety legislation to advocate for the passage of such legislation. We also work to oppose legislation that could erode existing gun safety protections. I'm here tonight to tell you that you can help. The gun safety movement in Maine has made more progress in the past 2 legislative sessions than ever before. We attribute this success to the hard work of the legislators in the Gun Safety Caucus and the profound turnout of Show Up Network volunteers. These volunteers emailed legislators, wrote letters to the editor, attended training sessions to learn about specific bills, drafted personal testimony, and then delivered this testimony to legislators in committee hearings. Having more Mainers speak up for gun safety has had a profound effect. In short, and to come full circle, as you and we look back upon Sandy Hook, let's keep at least one eye on the present and future. We can make Maine a safer state if we all work together. I invite you to join us. Please visit the MGSC website, mainegunsafetycoalition.org, and go to the Action tab to sign up for the Show Up Network.
We are just so fortunate in Maine to have many organizations that are working on this issue. Our next speaker is Jen DeCristoforo, who is a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Safety, and she's going to speak to us about a really important program about keeping children safe. So Jen, welcome to the podium.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer DeCristoforo, the main lead for Be Smart, a part of Moms Demand Action, Everytown for Gun Safety. Our focus with Be Smart is to educate and raise awareness about gun safety and secure gun storage in homes, schools, and communities. We offer information and resources to help adults understand their responsibility to keep their kids and communities safe, and we offer the tools to support everyone, young and old, in that effort. I'm so glad to be here this evening with all of you as we come together to honor and remember the 26 lives taken by senseless gun violence 10 years ago at Sandy Hook School. Their lives were cut tragically short, but their legacies live on in the enduring movement that has been built to combat our nation's devastating gun violence crisis. As heartbreaking as this loss is to me, even 10 years later, I take comfort in sharing this evening with other advocates of change for the future of our communities and our country. It allows us to grieve together and take action together. Obviously, our country is experiencing a gun violence crisis, and children and teens have grown up in the midst of it. Firearms are the leading cause of death for youth in the United States, and here in Maine, children and teens are at risk every day due to unsecured loaded firearms. As we honor the memory of a Connecticut classroom of children and educators that were massacred and keep them in our hearts, it is made even more tragic by how little has happened comparatively to address the gun violence epidemic since then, and how many school shootings there continue to be. But if we continue to work today, tomorrow, next week, next month, and next year to bring some substantial change to the gun culture in this country, we will save lives. In honor of the Sandy Hook families, their community, and so many more that have suffered devastating losses to gun violence, we will stand toe-to-toe with compassion, civility, and courage, and do the work that needs to be done. Thank you.
One piece of good news that we celebrate is that we do this work together, and that's been mentioned several times. And so it's appropriate for us to express gratitude when we feel it. And we want to say thanks to our partner organizations. You'll see some logos up on the screen, but we're so grateful to our own UUCB Working for Justice Steering Group, to the Brunswick Area Interfaith Council, to Remembering Darien, the Maine Council of Churches, the Episcopal Diocese of Maine, Maine Gun Safety Coalition, Maine Veterans for Peace, and Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Thank you so much for your ongoing partnership in this work. And we want to thank our UU helpers tonight as well, Lynn Ellis, who designed this program and works tirelessly with many of you. Dan Ellis for graphic design, our church administrator Shirley for copies and PowerPoint design, Glenn and Ward for the AV support, Mike Heath for helping to put up our banners, Carol and Cheryl, Kathy and Stan, Betsy, Dan, and Louise Gephardt, our harpist, and Lynn Deeves for organizing our musicians. Thank you for the energy and the heart you bring to this work and for continuing to do it together from here. As we leave this gathering tonight, we want to do so with intention and with purpose. The lives that we mourn tonight represent the spark of life in individuals of inherent worth and value. As we remember them, we keep those lights lit, and we carry them forward as we continue to do this work together of creating a more just and inclusive and loving and compassionate world. And so in just a minute, we're going to leave this space together and to carry this light forward. We're going to do two things. First, I'm going to ask you to rise as you're able, and we're going to sing a song meant to provide some encouraging music as we leave. And then we'll extinguish our chalice and pass that light on to the rest of you as symbolizing the ways in which we carry the light we kindle with us as we continue in the world. Let the singers come forward. The song is called Keep on Moving Forward, and again, it is meant to be encouragement. It's written by Pat Humphreys and performed by Emma's Revolution. And the words, there'll be a line, and we invite you to sing with us as we go. Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on loving boldly. Keep on being hopeful. Keep on being hopeful. Keep on being hopeful. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep the light shining. Keep the light shining. Keep the light shining. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. As we share the light with one another, let's be careful to nurture the flame and protect the floors. want to invite you to rise as you are able in body or spirit. And I want to invite you to turn around. And notice you are not alone in this place or in this work. Let us go forth carrying the light of hope and love together. Let us go in peace. And you can blow it out and light it again. Please go in peace.